Make a difference.
All my fault. I wish I could blame Sam, the producer. Moving on then, do you remember Mark Laws? He's a physical training coach from Inglesthorpe in West Norfolk. Now, back in the spring, he raised thousands for charity by walking from Carrow Road, you may remember, to Old Trafford. Now, Mark is taking on another challenge. In February, he's going to run, walk, cycle and wheelchair his way between Twickenham and Murrayfield for the Six Nations. It's called Tackling the Spine of Britain, and it's all to raise money for the charity Spinal Research. Our producer Paul Hayes has been finding out more from Spinal Research's Andy Russell, and first from Mark himself.
The challenge will see me do a combination of running, riding and rolling. So the riding will be on a bike and the rolling will be in a wheelchair. 450 miles-ish from Twickenham Stadium in London to Murrayfield Stadium in Edinburgh. So travelling up the spine of Britain in aid of spinal research. And the reason for it is mainly I did a fairly large charity event earlier in the year where I ran from Norwich City to Manchester United, 200 and something miles. And I had a lot of thinking time during those 6 days. And one of the things that I became ever more grateful of was the fact that my body could do things like that when I asked it to. And that just sort of started to send me down a few rabbit holes regarding the people who are less fortunate and whose bodies through accident or injury or illness who aren't able to do those things. So once I'd finished, I had the sort of bug and contacted Spinal Research to see if there was something that we could do together that would maybe help those people who are less fortunate.
And now, you talked there about your run between Norwich City and Manchester United, Carrow Road to Old Trafford, which obviously a footballing theme to that one. But your background and the theme for this particular effort is very much with rugby union, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've played 23, 24 senior seasons of rugby in and around Norfolk, Suffolk, and the whole of the Eastern Counties. And this is my first year where I haven't played, and I sort of partly needed something to replace that. So adding this challenge in there sort of has given me that sort of something to aim for. Now I'm a bit too old and too slow to play rugby. And I must have played over 500 rugby matches, and rugby's been a great sport for me. It's been a safe sport that I've loved and enjoyed, but there's a huge connection between the Spinal Research charity and the rugby community. So it was a great way to tie those two things together to sort of unite the whole rugby family, from north and south, league and union, from amateur to professional, etc., and to sort of use that as a stepping stone, really, to just raise a lot of awareness for Spinal Research.
And which is the organisation you're going to support with this, as you mentioned. And we have Andy with us as well from Spinal Research. Andy, can you tell us a bit more about the charity? I guess in some ways it does exactly what it says on the tin with Spinal Research, but can you tell us a bit more about what happens and who you support?
Yeah, so Spinal Research are the UK's leading medical charity looking at the repair and restoration of the spinal cord. People don't realise, but someone has a spinal cord injury every 4 hours in the UK. And that might be from a traumatic injury. It might be from things like contact sports. But sometimes also there is non-traumatic injuries where there's infections of the spine, or simply people having everyday accidents from cycling in the street and having a road traffic accident, or even falling off the ladder at home. So it's a whole variety. But like I say, there is quite a common injury that that we're trying to fix. And I think the key things for us now is that until recently it felt that any repair and restoration of the spinal cord was impossible. So people always thought about paralysis as being something that couldn't be fixed. We're getting to a point now where over the last 40 years the research has really accelerated our understanding of the spinal cord biology, and it's quite an exciting time that we're starting to develop treatments that will hopefully make a breakthrough into paralysis.
So Mark, can you explain a bit about why Spinal Research was a charity that you were particularly inspired to support?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I must have played 23 senior seasons of competitive rugby all around the Eastern Counties, and I reckon it must be over 500 matches. And luckily, I've been very fortunate that, other than the odd minor break or cuts and bruises, I've been relatively unscathed by the sport, and I've never seen any traumatic injuries when I've been on the pitch either. But there was a female ex-student of mine who was not quite so fortunate, and she suffered a rather bad spinal cord injury in a rugby match, which has left her permanently paralysed, and that's had a massive knock-on effect to her family life. She had 3 young children, and obviously puts additional pressure on her partner, who now has lots more pressure on him to help around the place. And that story sort of touched home quite a lot, really. Whereas on one hand, I'm very fortunate that my body is in one piece and it's capable of doing these silly long endurance events, but there are other people who, I don't know, people listening to this, but I'm sure everybody will know somebody who's been affected in some way, and it's for those people really, when a story close to home really happens, that kind of ignites a little bit more urgency, if you like, to be able to try to help and to make a positive difference for those people who have suffered the injuries that I haven't.
In terms of the actual challenge itself, practically, how's it going to work? I mean, what are you expecting to be the toughest bits? Will there be some sort of support team with you? How's it all going to work?
Good question. Listeners might remember from last time, I don't like to be accused of overly preparing for these things. So there's an element of winging it that I will be relying on. Looking at mileage wise, I need to do about 75 miles per day over the 6 days. The cycling section, I'll be able to get the most miles done, but I don't want to just do it all on the bike. Not because that would be easy, but I'm going to aim to try and do maybe 40-50 miles on the bike each morning to get as far as I can, as quickly as I can. Because bearing in mind the daylight hours will be shorter than they would be in the summer months. Then I'm going to sort of aim to run, probably try to cover a marathon on foot each day. And then there will be sort of sections logistically when I can get a wheelchair that I can use safely, sort of on a pavement or something like that, that I'm not putting myself or anyone else in danger. There'll be smaller sections that I will do in a wheelchair, just to sort of try to begin to even understand a fraction of a percentage of how difficult it is to have to get around using a chair. I have made contact with the Norfolk Knights wheelchair rugby team who train at Wyndham Leisure Centre. And I have sort of said to them that I'm going to go along and just to see what it's like to have a practice and to start to begin to realise how difficult it is, and probably quite how silly an idea it is for me to try and do it. So yeah, a combination of those three. I will have a support vehicle that will sort of get to various pit stops for refueling, and when I'm changing from running to biking or biking to the wheelchair. I haven't yet got all my volunteers in place, so I'm going to be contacting people who I know that might help me shortly. And other than that, it will be a case of just kind of taking the most sensible route. Along the way, I'm stopping off at as many iconic sort of rugby locations as possible. So everywhere from Oxford University to Rugby School, where the sport was first played, and numerous professional and amateur clubs along the way. So all of those are going to be an opportunity to sort of stop and refuel, change of transport, and try to generate as much enthusiasm and as much attention as possible while we're there.
So, Andy, coming back to you, if listeners have been inspired by this and they want to find out more, how can they find out more about Spinal Research and what you do and how they might be able to help?
Yeah, so obviously the website is the first place to start. So spinal-research.org. We've got we're on socials, and we'll be telling Mark's story and sharing some content about his kind of preparation for the challenge and some of the things that he's learned as well. Mark's got a Just Giving page, so it's it's for just giving / tackling Britain, so you should be able to find him quite easily on there. And then we're using the hashtags of tackling Britain and tackling paralysis as well. There is a texting, if I'm allowed to say that. So it's 70490. So 70490, and then if you just text rugby in capital letters with the amount you want to provide, that will be fantastic. And like I said, our research is really dependent upon the funding that we receive, and it's an exciting time for us right now because we are getting to a point where we're seeing the first generation of therapies that we think will make a functional improvement for people living with paralysis. So it's any donations, any support would be hugely appreciated.
Andy Russell from the Spinal Research Organisation, and before that, West Norfolk fundraiser Mark Laws speaking to our producer Paul Hayes.